I don't ultimately see that as much better, given all this technology that's would be in the hands of this one, or this very small group of people. But they don't own everything. They own a lot of technology, obviously, and technological platforms, social media, and all sorts of things. But it's up to people if they want to continue using those services and supporting these people, because ultimately they need us to make their system work. They want to harvest us for data, and like I said earlier, they want to use us as bootloaders for their digital intelligence, and they can't continue to improve and feed the AI without us doing it for them. They can't do it alone.
Something dangerous is taking shape, and by 2026, it won't be a prediction, it'll be your new reality. Right now, a tiny circle of power brokers controls the world's most advanced technologies. They don't need armies, they don't need governments. All they need is your data, and you give it to them every single day. Every swipe, every message, every moment online is training their machines. You're not a user anymore, you're the fuel. You're the unpaid worker building an intelligence that grows stronger, faster, and less dependent on you with every passing second. Investigative journalist Whitney Webb has already warned us. A handful of people are quietly tightening their grip on humanity's digital infrastructure. And the moment these systems stop needing human input, the balance of power snaps permanently. You think you're in control because you hold the phone, but the phone is holding you. According to Whitney Webb, 2026 isn't the future, it's the deadline.
In addition to saying that everything will be tokenized, he's said that everything will soon be on the same universal digital ledger or database, and that everything on that database will have a unique identifier number. So for you as an individual, your identifier number will presumably be your digital ID or directly linked to that. But everything will have a digital ID. The tokenization agenda in particular seeks to tokenize not just assets that we traditionally think of, like real estate, for example, or gold, or physical assets, as well as digital assets like Bitcoin. There's a major effort connected with people like Fink, and also people like Mark Carney, who's now Prime Minister of Canada, to tokenize the natural world and transform it into financial assets. And there was an attempt to do this to an extent under the Biden administration, I believe, through the Department of Interior, with natural asset corporations, but that has not gone away. And there are groups, for example, one of the creators of the ETF model originally, which BlackRock now owns, iShares. His name is Peter Kenez, I think is how you pronounce it. He's trying to turn the Amazon rainforest into a digital commodity, sort of similar to Bitcoin in terms of like the scarcity idea that each hectare of the Amazon rainforest would represent a token, and then financialize it that way, and then each hectare would then have its unique identifier, right, on the blockchain, and would be serviced by surveillance drones and all sorts of stuff. So even our most like natural, the places we conceptualize as the most natural places on Earth, these people want to come in, place surveillance technology and tokenize it and put it on a blockchain and use it to I would argue in the case particularly of natural asset corporations and the group behind it, the Intrinsic Exchange Group, they just want to open up a huge new asset class. They call it nature's opportunity, so that they can continue engaging in the same type of bad behavior that, for example, brought us the 2008 financial crisis. By quintupling basically the amount of assets currently in play. Well, I think people have been increasingly normalized to the dissolution between the digital and virtual worlds, and that's not by coincidence. So going back to the World Economic Forum, the goal of the WEF's so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution is to blur those lines very overtly. And so, what we're seeing here are stepping stones leading us to an increasingly encroaching all digital system. And you know, it probably began some time ago. I'm sure you remember several years ago, Mohammed bin Salman, for example, gave citizenship to a robot,
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of framed as novel. But you know, there's been an effort to normalize these kinds of things with respect to the government. So now they're having um, you know, AI run the government under the guise that it's more efficient, it's more trustworthy, and all of that. But again, who is accountable if the AI makes a mistake? Because AI does make mistakes. AI also hallucinates and returns results that are essentially indicative of an irreality, something that is completely not true. And so, who is accountable in those cases? Can they hold the AI minister directly accountable? Not really. Does the accountability fall to the person who programmed the AI? It obviously opens up a pretty sticky situation. But I would, in the case of this, argue that this is in furtherance of an agenda that was actually laid out by Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt in their book. I forget what it's called. Sorry about that. But
That's all
they
right.
wrote a couple books on AI. In the earlier one, I think it's AI and Our Human Future is the subtitle, or The Age of AI, something like that. They essentially argue that we should put AI in charge of government because they assume, they obviously believe that AI is a form of a super intelligence, therefore it knows better than humans do. And so even when it returns these unreal, irreality results, we should take that as a sign that it can see things humans cannot see. We should just trust that it's there because we should trust that it's super intelligent, and sort of you know, offset, give it power over our lives, supposedly because it's a better arbiter of what's real and what's not than we are, which is I think
Terrifying.
that is just insane. Also, sorry to keep repeating that word, but
No.
it's hard. Some of this is really
Insane.
just bonkers stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in addition to that, Kissinger and Schmidt laid out that their biggest interest in AI was its impact on human perception. And ultimately, if you're able to completely control how people perceive reality, you control their behavior. You don't need mind control at the end of the day, or any of these things in the back that you know, the CIA and national security agencies were experimenting with. You know, you don't need that if you can completely control their perception of what's going on. And so the goal, as they lay out here, or laid out in that book, is to have people rely on AI for their perception of essentially everything. And that eventually, by doing so, people would be what the term they used was cognitively diminished, to the point that they wouldn't be able to understand how AI acts upon them anymore. But that wouldn't be true for everyone. There would be a small class that is not affected that way, and they would be the class that programs and maintains the AI, determines what it does. But the rest of us, a large underclass, would be acted upon by the AI, but again, lose the mental capacity to understand what it's doing to them. And that eventually it would start determining their preferences for them. You know, that gets thrown around a lot for this as post-human future, but what is more evil to
Then-
humanity than that?
Right.
Just eliminating us and turning us into what some of these libertarian oligarchs called technoplastic beings. I mean, some of them think that humans are nothing more than bootloaders for digital intelligence. I mean, that's how we are perceived by a lot of these tech oligarchs, because again, a lot of their goal, and they've been relatively open about this, is to live forever. But in defiance of natural law. So using technology to allow them to become gods. A lot of these tech oligarchs, including like the co-founders of Google, have been pretty open about that. And even someone like Jeffrey Epstein, for example, who was very interested in eugenics and AI and all of that, was interested in you know, those technologies for those same ends. I mean, there's a whole group of, I would call them pretty sick billionaires who want to use this technology to better themselves in that way and live forever, while the rest of us become cognitively become cognitively incapable of questioning what ultimately is amount to slavery.
The idea discussed centers on a future where everything is tokenized and recorded on a single, universal digital ledger, with each item assigned a unique digital identifier. This includes not only traditional assets like real estate and gold, as well as digital currencies like Bitcoin. These tokens would have unique IDs and be monitored through technologies like surveillance drones. This push is part of a broader initiative to create new asset classes from nature, which some compare to the conditions that contributed to the 2008 financial crisis by massively expanding the scope of financialized assets. Additionally, there is a movement to integrate AI more deeply into governance. Some proponents, referencing thinkers like Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt, argue AI's superior intelligence merits it controlling government decisions. However, this raises concerns about accountability, as AI can make errors and generate false information, and about its ability to shape human perception. This could lead to a future where a select group controls AI, while the majority become intellectually subdued, with preferences and decisions influenced or determined by AI systems.
If you look at their philosophy, their own words, they're overtly transhumanist. A lot of them, despite saying things to the contrary, want global government in some form. And, the ones on the supposedly libertarian side frame it as having a CEO in charge of everything, but a CEO that would govern as a dictator. So I don't ultimately see that as much better, given all this technology that's would be in the hands of this one, or this very small group of people. But they don't own everything. They own a lot of technology, obviously, and technological platforms, social media, and all sorts of things. But it's up to people if they want to continue using those services and supporting these people, because ultimately they need us to make their system work. They want to harvest us for data, and like I said earlier, they want to use us as bootloaders for their digital intelligence, and they can't continue to improve and feed the AI without us doing it for them. They can't do it alone. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the effort to enslave us has been to cajole us and influence us with convenience and comfort. But also in theory, prison is comfortable, right? In the sense that you have a roof over your head and they bring you food. And I mean, a digital prison without walls, could be similarly comfortable, and you wouldn't have to lift a finger to fight, for your freedom, but we can still, you wouldn't have to lift a finger to fight for your freedom. You would just willingly walk into the system, right? But those of us that don't want to live in the system have to do something. And so I think we're at a crossroads, and have been for several years, where those of us that don't want to walk into this have to actively build alternatives. And if you don't have, a ton of people in your community doing that, maybe you should reach out and build awareness. But if you have people that are aware of this around you, it's important to build, I would argue, local resilient networks that don't depend on this infrastructure. There's still open source alternatives to a lot of the big tech platforms out there. And I still think I'm still hopeful that there is time. But, ultimately at the end of the day, if they're pushing us towards a post-human future, I think at some point people will realize that they don't want to lose what makes us human. And so much of what we're being pushed to use AI for are creative pursuits that help define us as human, right? Making art, making music, writing. These are the things that we're being told to outsource to artificial intelligence, not necessarily the tedious stuff, right? So what's going to be left for us when we outsource of this all to AI? Will we allow ourselves to be cognitively diminished to the point that we can't even create anymore? And then what kind of, humans are we at that point? So I think it's very important to encourage analog alternatives to that kind of stuff, and to engage in creativity. And there's a lot of opportunity for that, especially for people that have children. Children are very creative, and we need to promote that to them, instead of being like, here's a tablet, learn how to scroll by the time you're 3 or 4,
right.
And navigate the algorithms. If we do nothing and we don't shift that cultural behavior, or what's being made, common culture cultural behavior now, then yeah, it will be very problematic. And so I think, it's a very important time right now for parents to make sure your kids are well and anchored in the real world, and not just checked out to lunch and trusting, potentially trusting algorithms more than you. I mean, there's these efforts to have domestic robots in the house. A lot of the ads show young children developing emotional relationships with these robots,
Very
saying,
bad.
I love you, and all of this stuff. That is not good. I absolutely agree. And so, just because you want to focus on yourself or X, Y, and Z is no excuse to have, the emotional connection your child needs be built with a machine programmed by who knows who. I mean, so many of these big tech figures also had relationships to Jeffrey Epstein, a pedophile. Do you want to trust those people to program stuff that's around your kids and talks to them and, potentially manipulates them when you're not there? So, it's not just with that too. I mean, that is the idea of taking active responsibility for things in your life. And we need to do more of that. And culturally, Americans have been the best at that for a very long time. But there have been a lot of efforts to condition us out of that. And a lot of it has been through this effort to cultivate the importance of comfort above all else and convenience. The idea of rugged individualism in the U.S. Unfortunately has been, greatly reduced. And I think it's important for us to take active responsibility, because the pull of AI is to get for us to be passive and do nothing and just let it wash over us. And you don't have to do that anymore. AI can do that, and AI can do this for you, and this and that. And if we're not focused on the things that we like to create and that we like to do, and active, we will recede. And that is how the post-human future will happen. There is still a lot of time for agency, but people just need to be really aware of what's going on and determined to change it.
Whitney Webb expressed concern over the concentration of advanced technology in the hands of a small group of people who control major platforms like social media. She emphasized that these powerful entities rely on ordinary users to sustain their systems by providing data and effectively serving as bootloaders for AI, which cannot improve without human input. She highlighted how convenience and comfort are used to entice people into this digital framework, comparing it to a kind of comfortable prison where individuals might willingly enter without resistance. She urged those unwilling to submit to this system to actively build alternatives, particularly resilient local networks that don't depend on mainstream infrastructure. Webb pointed out the importance of fostering creativity and engaging in analog activities, warning against over-reliance on AI for tasks that define human identity, such as art, music, and writing. She stressed that exposing children to real-world experiences instead of screen-based technologies is crucial for maintaining human creativity. Whitney Webb also noted that social media platforms increasingly use AI to control content exposure, shaping perceptions and emotions at scale. She recalled that propaganda use on the domestic population was officially lifted during the Obama administration, which contributes to today's sophisticated manipulation efforts. She argued for the urgent need to maintain critical thinking to navigate these challenges effectively. As we wrap up, how do you think we can balance the convenience of new technologies with protecting our creativity and autonomy in an increasingly AI-driven world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Share this video and hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.